It's Monday, April 22nd. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, we're asking, WTF, where's the food? We will talk about what is being grown, harvested, and foraged across Newfoundland and Labrador, and what it means for food security and community sustainability. And it's Earth Day. You know, that reminder of the importance of environmental conservation and sustainability, encouraging us to come together, take action for a healthier planet and brighter future. So today's conversation fits under an Earth Day theme. In this hour, we're going to hear about regenerative farming, the importance of composting, the bounty that surrounds us for foraging, and why enhanced food security is better for our communities and the environment. So joining me for this conversation, Dan Rubin is here, founding chair of the Food Producers Forum, as well as Nick Fairbridge, a researcher and farming advocate. Welcome back to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Adam.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, you know, flowers are growing outside. It might even be double digits. It was 9 last I checked with Environment Canada for St. John's, but I don't know, with the feeling, I think we can just bump it to 1 extra degree anyways.
Well, I've certainly been out in the garden this weekend, clearing things up, taking things apart and putting them back together. With your indulgence, I have to say this is Earth Day, and I have to get the rant off my back.
Go. Hey, this is what it's for.
So here's what I think, folks. Earth Day. It's been 54 years since the launch of Earth Day, quite successfully in 1970. Now, during that time, I've been various places. In 1972, I was graduating from a program in education at the University of Victoria. And within a few months later, I was putting together an exhibit at the Royal BC Museum in Victoria as a curator about the extinction crisis. Before that, I helped put together and publish a BC kind of whole earth catalog for independent living and learning. And I'm kind of on the same page as David Suzuki, which is that over the last half century, we've been fiddling while Rome burned. And what I mean by that is that too many of the stances we've taken have been symbolic and theoretical and not strategic. So when we talk about this survey in food today, I'm very proud of the fact that we're a volunteer team that put this together with no funding whatsoever, and of the fact that this is detailed, this is strategic, it's not theoretical, it's not slapping ourselves on the back. For 50 years, we've been doing the good thing, and it has not solved the problem. We're still in deep water when it comes to the survival of the living planet. That's my rant. Sorry.
Nick, now it's time for your rant.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry, you guys. I just had to say that.
It's
been
okay. Well,
chewing me up.
I know. I appreciate it because when we were organizing the show, we were planning this show, right, to have you back in to talk, because we've talked about this. And I'm holding the report in my hand here, right? Where's the food survey report? Food Producers Forum. I knew it was going to be Earth Day. We talked about this, and I thought, I want to tie it together because obviously it's connected. And then, so you did a great job of really furthering the connection for Earth Day and where we are with this. Nick, tell us how you got involved with this from the get-go, and then we'll circle back, and then we'll push forward.
Yeah. So one of my goals in all of this is to try and get people thinking about food and our local food sources the same way we all seem to think about water, because we all want to protect our water system. We see that whether it's at a municipal level or in our regulations, everybody seems to know we need to take care of our local water systems, and we do that so well. Even if you have a private well, the municipality or the province, it's supporting you. It's keeping that safe and protected in the zoning and everything else. And food and water, so vital, especially in theme of Earth Day. It's all connected, right? It's so critical, not only for us and our families, but for our whole communities, the long-term sustainability. But if we take a moment and picture and pretend our food system right now, and what would happen if it was water? Well, if since Confederation, we had lost over 90% of all protected water systems we rely on in this province. And if since that time, it's not just historic, every 5 years, the Census of Agriculture shows us we continue to lose more and more of that protected system. And we've gotten to a point now, if we imagine, if our water system collapsed the same way, where over 80% of our communities didn't have a local water source, and we were making them leave their community to go purchase from a larger center commercial system. And then imagine in the state of all of that, you'd have no other topic on your show. We'd all be here going, oh my God, we're falling apart. What are we doing with our local water? We've seen that in the Boyle water system and that whole story that unfolded a little while ago. We know people care about it. And if in the state of all that, instead of seeing our cities and our communities come together and actually change it and act on it, this inaction over years, instead they put in regulations that say, well, actually you can't have your own private well. You have to go to the commercial system. You're not allowed to even collect rainwater, and actually blocking the things people could do to look after their families and their own sustainability. There'd be an uproar.
Yeah.
But that's the exact state we're in our food system. The Census of Agriculture has showed we've lost almost all of our farms.
We've lost 51% of our cultivated farmland in 20 years. That's not a great story.
Yeah. And so it's kind of all falling apart on there's absolutely some good stories and there's good work trying to keep it going.
Yeah.
But we see it continue to decline on that system. And yet we're also seeing municipalities coming out and blocking individuals. The majority of municipalities that have development regulations, you can't have a garden according to those regulations. And the
You can't have a greenhouse, you can't keep chickens in many places, even rural places.
Yeah, and even especially with the chickens, the vast majority say you can't have any of that, and yet it's so vital. And if I think if the communities could just see the potential, and I'm hoping this report's part of it. This is actually putting numbers to say there's great potential. We really can raise and grow food, and we can do it even at a household level, even at a dispersed, without huge investments. It can happen, and there's so much potential there. But we need to protect it the same way we protect our water, right? So that
the thing for Food Producers Forum is that we're not an advocacy group. We avoid that role because we don't want to spend our time arm wrestling. What we want to do, and it's our function to be an information hub, is to connect people so we can all learn from each other. And what we realized, the reason we did this survey is because we realized that nobody, whether in the public or at the provincial level, had any clue to how much food is being produced. And that's because so much of it is the hidden part of the iceberg. It's the community food production. And so based on those regulations that Nick was just talking about that derived from language taken word for word from a British planning document published in 1947, we're being told that the only place food belongs is out there, out of reach on the farm, while we've lost half our farmland. So the great thing about the survey is that we've identified finally some real data on what's being produced, grown, gathered, foraged, hunted, fished, gardened, farmed at the community level. And we have those numbers.
And it's a lot.
It's astonishing. I would have guessed, and I think I did guess sitting here talking to you or someone else across this table at CBC about 2 years ago that there's probably a couple of million pounds of food being produced. No, we got answers to the survey from 742 local residents in 167 communities, so it was very broadly based right across the island and into Labrador. And the amount of production gathered and grown from those 742 people was 6.2 million pounds of food.
Wow. Whose cell phone's that? I checked
That's
mine.
mine, unfortunately.
Oh, it's okay.
It will go off.
I like it. It's nice.
It's the sound of music.
So
it's really good.
I'll jump in
go
then.
ahead,
So for everyone else who hasn't seen the survey, hopefully you will soon, to really put that into kind of individual perspective. So yes, we heard from a lot of people, and of the 6.2 million the commercial growers, they made up a huge amount of that.
Yeah.
But even outside of the commercial system, from our almost 750 participants, we still documented almost 440,000 pounds of food grown at the community level in backyards, in chicken coops. And what we saw in that data is if you were involved in any kind of gardening, so half of our respondents still told us that they managed over 150 pounds of produce, vegetables, and fruit out of their home system. And if they were involved in any kind of meat production or hunting, fishing, kind of putting it together, half of them said we're getting at least 130 pounds or more of animal and meat products. And both of those are skewed high. So if you catch your moose, right, then that average is really high. The average was actually almost 380 pounds of meat when you account for that. And of the produce, we also have a small number of people growing massive amounts, tons of food. And so the average production was actually over 500 pounds per person or per household working at growing that local community food.
Wow.
One of the really neat things to me, and I love working with Nick, is that he and I have academic training, right? But we had a committee that included people from the Department of Agriculture and the former president of the Federation, Merv Weisman, and students and people from the farming communities. And so we had a lot of stuff in the stone soup, as it were.
It was a real full court press in this. When I was looking through the names, it's just like, wow, this is substantial, right? And all those names together to put a document like this together to try to have a start. Because other times when I've done other shows around information from municipalities, a lot like there's like for example with housing and homelessness, there's historically been a real lack of data, right?
Yeah.
So Hope Jameson, they were in here talking about a research project around this, and now here we are again talking about food security, lack of data, but now we have this in front of us.
So once we had done our survey in the fall of 2022, then we had something real that we could go back to, a line in the sand, as it were, knowing what our capacity really may be. Now, it's very hard for us to extrapolate from 742 survey responses, but, there's 60,000 people on backyard farming and homesteading on Facebook, and I've done workshop presentations now to 2,600 people.
Yeah.
And so we know there's been a huge resurgence in the interest in growing our own food. And one of the core samples that we see, and it's anecdotal, is that all over the province, we see young couples going back to farming. And I could give you examples. But the people who participated in this survey, I think, did you run down the numbers that were foragers and hunters and fishers?
No,
and all
not
that?
the full amount. So
let's run that number because it's quite astonishing how the overlap goes, particularly in rural communities, that people are doing all of it. They're hunting, they're foraging, they're fishing, and they're also gardening. So out of those 742, we had 689 farmers and gardeners, 650 foragers, 179 who raise livestock, 325 hunters, and 500 people who fish.
Wow. Yeah. So these are folks who are engaged with.
But it also tells us where our food is. Our food is coming from all over the place, and there's still this really strong connection to tradition, particularly in rural communities.
And we argued a lot back and forth as a team as to how much we can scale this up. Can we really predict from this number of participants what we have as a province? And it's so hard. But we can hang it on, what do we see in social groups? But one place we did agree on is that if we can get people across the province growing at the same intensity that our participants did, which when you really break it down, 150 pounds of food in a garden, that's a lot. But when you also forage some blueberries out from a field and you maybe have an old apple tree, you can actually get to that quite reasonably as an individual. If we could get 1% of our population at that level, based on this, that suggests about 2 million pounds of food could be produced outside. But we think we can go higher. I mean, looking at how many moose tags go out every year or how many people are involved in these social media groups, if we could get 10% of our population being able to work even close to these levels, we might be talking 20 million pounds of food.
Exactly, because that's like 20,000 households, 10% of the households. And one of the things that happened within that team that we formed, because Food Producers Forum always uses the team approach, because that way more heads make better soup, and we've got all this diversity of background, and we really gain insight from that. But Nick and I are both researchers, so one of the things we didn't want to do was ask questions to which there was really stupid answers. Do you like broccoli? You don't learn anything from that. No. But if we ask people how many pounds of broccoli they grew and did they compost and what are their needs, then we were able to gather data that means something.
And one of the things that really struck me is, because we did ask, are you growing broccoli?
Yeah,
right?
we asked
did.
What are you growing? How much are you growing? That kind of a thing.
Everything we thought of could be happening on the island, and throughout Labrador, people were doing it. Everything we asked, there was a huge variety, and I think that struck me. Yes, potatoes made up one of the largest
3% of the people that we polled are growing grapes.
Yeah, which is a lot of grapes at 300 thousand pounds, right?
Yes.
Documented here.
Yeah, so you're talking somewhere around 24 people are growing grapes, right? Or like a little bit more.
So that's total. Yeah. So that it was total volume of produce.
Okay.
So they were growing a lot of everything.
3% of what's being reported as being grown are grapes.
And people wrote in even more in the open-ended. They said, "Oh, there's even stuff you haven't thought of. We're doing this, and we're doing this, we're doing this." Everything, right, came out.
It also shows that there's real needs, and we can talk about what those needs are, but that there's a huge amount of knowledge and innovation happening. It is partly traditional and partly very high-tech and new. There's people with, computer-controlled greenhouses out there. I know one down the Burin. And there are people who are innovating in the way that they're growing and moving toward permaculture and truly regenerative processes. And now that I'm leading the project that came out of the survey, which is the Provincial Food Network, when we look around at our 14 sites, our 3 sites in Labrador and 11 here on the island, we see that innovation in spades. And it really is paying off in terms of kilograms of food being produced.
Let's go to the phone lines. And folks, so the way this show is working today, so this is The Signal. You're listening to The Signal with me, Adam Walsh, and we are talking all about food security. We're asking, where's the food today, right? It's all about this survey report by the Food Producers Forum. We're looking at who's growing, hunting, harvesting, fishing, you name it, across this province, what it means. And this is all under an Earth Day conversation as well, right? So we're phoning a couple of folks who were attached to some of this project, really. Anita Walsh, Windy Heights Farm in Portugal Cove, one of them. How you doing?
Oh, very good. How are you?
Good. All right, so I was on your website this morning. Windy Heights Farm is a 400-acre farm in Portugal Cove, St. Philip, serving the Avalon Peninsula. We are a family-owned farm dedicated to being stewards of the land and using regenerative and sustainable farming practices. Can you tell me, as we jump into this, when we say regenerative and sustainable farming practices, what does that mean and why is it so important?
So the traditional commercial farm has a tendency to dig the soil, spray chemicals, and use monocultures, as in one type of crop per field. A regenerative approach goes back more to the olden times where you're utilizing animals to rejuvenate the soil and rotating them over a piece of land, and then you will take a field, and rather than plow it under, you'll actually sow something like a cover crop, and then you will sow something that you want to harvest into that cover crop. And so the whole thing is no dig, no chemicals, and utilizing your animals to rejuvenate the soils. And that whole different mindset actually builds the soil, which is really helpful in Newfoundland because we have very little of it.
Yeah, I could see how building soil could be a bit of a big deal for the province. What's the output? What are you folks remind us of what you're growing at Windy Heights?
So most of the fields grow hay to feed to the animals. We grow livestock, so we support an awful lot of other farmers for their feed for their animals. And then we have our own cattle and pigs. And then we also grow gourmet mushrooms indoors.
That's right. Yeah, no, I was looking at some of the eggs on the website earlier this morning as well, so giving myself a reminder. So, when you think about farming and challenges in Newfoundland and Labrador, what types of things would make your job easier, or what types of things do you think we need to kind of work on in terms of getting rid of some of the challenges for farmers in this province?
Okay, so I'm first going to explain the challenges that I had that we're all facing with supply chain, because my gourmet mushrooms are still behind the 8 ball because of supply chain issues and the amount of time it took and the amount of bureaucratic red tape that you go through for different things. So that delayed that, but that's not for all farmers. That's only when you're doing projects or expanding something, right? And that's pretty much general to everybody that's trying to expand something here on the island. But from a farming perspective, the biggest challenge we have when we're trying to grow our own meat, we don't have good access to abattoirs or butcher shops. We have to wait in a long lineup. Our appointments get canceled repeatedly. You're always put at the end of. So you're trying to compete with people that are growing their own animals, and then they also have a slaughterhouse so they can slaughter their own animals, and they'll do that over top of someone else, of course, because you would look after yourself first. And then you're competing with the moose season when the moose is here. And so we're finding it very difficult from a harvest perspective. When we're growing meat, we can't raise meat for sale without bringing it to a licensed butcher. And that is the biggest problem for all meat producers on the island. Access to butcher shops, abattoirs, a way to process our animals. We're not allowed to do it ourselves.
Let me bring Dan Rubin into this.
I wanted to say thank you, Anita. I feel like I was talking to you earlier today because
Yes,
Anita is on the board of food producers. But listen, we, as you know, I think we heard a lot about that problem in the requests for what we need that came back through the survey. Many mentions of the fact that abattoirs have been shut down. In fact, out on the west coast of the island, there's a wonderful farm that was set up to raise animals and funded by the provincial government, and they had to shut it down because they have nowhere to dispose in an acceptable way of their waste from their abattoir because they're not being allowed to bury it. They have to pay to bring it to a landfill, which is frankly crazy. But we've heard from a lot of people that there is a need for local abattoirs or mobile abattoirs, along with the need for cold storage and tool sharing and various kinds of ideas.
Heard the same thing talking to farmers when I was in Happy Valley Goose Bay before Christmas, right? Same thing. That abattoir, the word came up again and again.
Yep. And so, what I'm also thinking is, because I'm an out-of-the-box type thinker, and all our family is, I was thinking, why can't meat producers all have their own smaller abattoirs that can be licensed for themselves, that can be regulated, and then there will be a smaller amount of offal that should be able to be handled in any hot compost system, which would be a lot more beneficial for the environment. You'd have no backlog of animal production, and you'll be able to spread it out so these animals have the best life. They don't have any stress going to the abattoir, being put in a tight pen in a different area. If they're harvested on site, they don't even know what's going on. They just think they're having a regular day. And that's, you want your animals to have the best life possible too. So there's so many benefits, and it's an idea that I think is very viable because then you don't have to think of these mass productions. It's a lot of small components of properly trained, properly outfitted, properly inspected meat-producing abattoirs.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And what I would say about that, and taking it to the eagle's eye view of our whole society, we've been sold this bill of goods. We've been told that bigger is better, that corporate is in charge and all of that. And a big part of regenerative approaches to growing food are to honor the soil and rebuild the soil. But it's a lot about scale, about scaling back to the community level. And there's been a recent research report by 3 very high-placed economists in Scandinavia that said the industrial food system costs more in human health damage and in impact from climate change than the value of the food that we create through the industrial process. So a lot of it is about scaling back to small, local food production.
Yeah, yeah. And then when you're getting to a position where you have a larger farm and you're able to produce more, we have barriers in Newfoundland as well, which is totally separate from the abattoir. And that's the fact that we don't even have a federal inspector for HACCP inspections, which is a requirement that larger commercial farms need in order to be able to sell to stores. So that's why you don't see local produce in all the stores, because they need to be HACCP certified. And there's only 4 HACCP certified farms on the island right now, and they have to pay for a federal inspector to fly over, to stay over here and do inspections. And those are required, and there's an awful lot of paperwork, and there's an awful lot of money involved. So like those barriers to entry are hampering our ability to be self-sustainable on the island, right?
Anita, we got to move on to the next caller here now. I just want to say thanks for coming on the show and talking about those barriers, which, from hey, I'm not a farmer. I don't know about this stuff, but it all sounds solvable for some of these things that you're talking about here. So thank you so much for pointing all this out.
Oh, thank you. And talk to you soon, Dan. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, Anita.
Bye, Anita. Before we go to our next call, Nick, any other thoughts on what's been brought up, or Dan?
Well, for me, one of the biggest things that always stands out is just that I can raise a chicken and I can sell you that live chicken.
Yeah.
Right. When we're talking about especially the abattoir problem, or I can sell a goat to Dan, and then we rely on Dan having the skills. If he wants to butcher that chicken or eat it, that it's up to him. Right. It's kind of the liability goes with him, but why can't more farmers, absolutely there's food standards, there's the training that's needed, there's the inspectors that's trained, but we can create that infrastructure, right? Yeah. It might not be as cost effective as a large center, but we could do it here. And likewise, the other discussion I just saw coming out is concerns with the provincial vet and whether that service is actually going to be widely available. So far, there's some movement that it's not going to be available as much or at all to homesteaders as they have to scale back. And it's just, where are the resources going? If the province wants us to double local food production, that's the goal, right? That means double the animals. That means double the resources need to be there to support all of that.
Let's go back. We've got someone else on the line here now, Viviana Ramirez-Luna, who has been on the show before talking about composting. And guess what? She's going to talk about it again. How are you doing?
Hello. Happy to be here, to be back.
Hey, remind us, so Georgetown Community Compost, when did it start and how's it doing?
It's doing well. It started in the spring 2021, so 3 years now, year-round for the most part. This year, despite the amount of snow, unusual snow that we had, it was accessible all winter thanks to volunteers, shoveling, and very involved, committed participants bringing their organics during these cold months.
Why did it start to begin with?
The year before, we got together a small group, how we reduce waste in St. John's, and realized that there was already a lot of recycling initiatives and backyard composting going on. But if we really want to have an impact, we needed to up the game in composting. And shortly after that, I learned about community composting, which is a way to start to go beyond backyard composting. First of all, increasing access to more people who cannot do backyard composting. And 2, a way to start low risk, low cost, and, a system that you can learn from and expand. And that's been the case. Georgetown itself hasn't expanded. We have 3 Juracan bins. They're metal insulated, work really, really good. And over time, the goal has been replicating that program in other parts of the city. And then the conversation grew to a provincial network where we want to see different scales of composting that would meet community needs and dynamics. We all know Newfoundland and Labrador is a vast province with many small, remote communities. And the approach that we have right now for recycling, which is having a big facility here in St. John's, Robin Hood, then in central and western Newfoundland, where Northern Peninsula is completely forgotten, where Labrador is completely forgotten. It just doesn't work. We cannot do the same with composting. And it's a way to bring composting, to make it accessible to every community, and again, meeting their needs.
Yeah, I'll bring Dan back into the conversation here now, too.
Hola, Viviana. ¿Cómo estás?
Hola, Dan. Muy bien. ¿Y tú?
So Viviana is a treasured friend and a former member of our board who we had to let go so she could move on to create what she's talking about now, which is the Provincial Composting Network. And I wanted to say something that connects composting to regenerative and to Earth Day, and it is this, that nutrients are supposed to move in a cycle. They're supposed to return to the soil and feed the soil. And when they do that, when I put my compost from our kitchen waste back into my garden, oh my God, can I grow stuff? It's great. And the reason is that it's rich in all these nutrients and micronutrients that the plants need and that our bodies also need for health. Not just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but selenium and iron and all those other
stuff.
micronutrients.
Yeah, sure.
Those other ones that I can't think of the name of. And so that what happens in the soil when you allow the soil to regenerate is that you let the creatures that industrial agriculture kills return to the soil. And that's bacteria and amoebae and fungi and arachnids, miniature mites and spiders and insects and worms, all the creepy crawlies that we go, ooh, the bugs. Well, stop doing that, folks. Don't do that, because those things break the nutrients down and make them tiny and water soluble, and then the plants can get them. I was speaking to a researcher at the University of Victoria. Her name is Brooke Hayes, and she went from being an administrator in the provincial government to rediscovering her love for soil. So she's a doctoral student in soil science at UVic. She said to me on the phone, how many organisms do you think are in a teaspoon of soil, like a gram of soil? I said, I don't know. She said, more than the stars in the known universe.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's billions. And when you allow that life to come back to the soil, you, as Anita was saying, you don't dig it up and you don't poison it with chemicals and you let it restore its ecology, and it can happen very quickly in just a few years. Then you get the good stuff, the really healthy food. And that's why composting is so important, because it's putting those nutrients to feed that food web back into the soil.
And Nick wanted to jump in there now.
Sure. And just to add in a round out for those who are less touchy-feely with the bugs and comfortable, but you're more concerned with your pocketbook, for any municipal councillors out there, composting also makes up a lot of potential savings that you could have at a municipal level. If we take those St. John's waste audit at about 30% of all garbage being organics, and then especially for our smaller communities, they are paying someone to pick that up. They're paying someone to drive it all the way in to Robin Hood Bay or elsewhere. Then they're paying tipping fees per ton to put it in. So the cost savings to a small community, if they could support programs like this, get the distribution, get it out of that waste stream, there's savings all the way across. And then that can help feed your community, quite literally, both through the compost you're doing, but also at the level of municipal budget, because now you're seeing cost savings by supporting these activities.
And Viviana, you're scaling this up, right? Because it went from Georgetown Community Compost to then the Newfoundland and Labrador Community Composting Network. So just without knowing anything else, it sounds bigger, right, for me. Where are things going now?
So a group of 3 people, 12 really, are working on the incorporation of a co-op. So what we're looking is to bring together those who are already making compost and are needing resources to grow their operations, to improve their operations and share resources. I myself have a project of having a composting facility, a small scale. I don't want to scare people because that's one of the challenges. You know, people hear about composting or facilities, and that's going to be stinky and going to attract pests. But this is the beauty about the small scale. We want to keep it small size, manageable, where we are, you know, sharing those resources, making compost, reducing waste. You know, what just Nick said is a huge part of the picture. Treating composting not only as agriculture activity or linked to food production, but also as a waste management issue. We are also running out of landfill space. A way to act right now is diverting organics. So it's bringing all these different connections together, and people, again, working on it, interested in it, connecting those who are producing, you know, kitchen scraps, like residential kitchen scraps. It's often out of the picture too because the focus goes to industrial levels like fisheries, forestry, things like that, like using those organics and turning them into something else and creating economic value. But one of my focuses is also what's going on with residential kitchen scraps. And most towns are surrounded by farms. That's raw material right there that can go to farms and increase or contribute to farms that are already composting and still need resources, raw material, kitchen scraps, to increase their production, the food production. So that's the cycle, how we connect the producers of kitchen scraps and many other type of organics with those who are producing the food, while municipalities get also the benefits, and hopefully all residents in our tax bill.
And we're going to hear more about how to incubate a co-op, and this one you're talking about, because next Tuesday, on the 30th of this month, we have a co-op show that we're doing, and it's yours along with a couple of others. So, folks, if you want to know more about co-ops in this province, we've got a full show coming a week and a day from now. Viviana, I want to say thanks for taking time out of your day for coming back on to The Signal. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, cheers. Viviana Ramirez-Luna there. Go ahead, Dan.
Hola, I was just going to say that what Viviana is talking about and the strategies that she's using and our survey are about something, and it's the power of small. And you may think if you're a backyard gardener and you grow just a few vegetables and then you share them with your neighbor, you're not doing much. But you're doing actually something very important, because all those small bits add up. And that's what our survey showed more than anything else. Yeah. That if 742 people can produce 6.2 million pounds of food, and granted, most of that came from 30 large commercial farms, but 440,000 pounds came from home gardeners, foragers, fishers, hunters, then we have a tremendous power. We have the ability to take back into our hands the healing of the earth. This is certainly the day to talk about that, by being gardeners and by being composters and by sharing our knowledge with each other.
You're listening to The Signal. I'm Adam Walsh. It is our Earth Day edition of this show. And, you know, today we're asking WTF, where's the food? Because we're talking about a survey report by the Food Producers Forum. We're looking at what is grown, harvested, picked, fished, hunted all across Newfoundland and Labrador. And talking about it, thinking about it, it's a conversation around food security. It's about sustainability for our communities. All of that together under the one umbrella for this conversation.
Let me pop in here and say to the listeners that you can read the survey report in detail. It took us 2 years to cook the data down, and we have them all now completely, neatly tabulated and in pie charts and all of that. And the 13 recommendations are here, and an executive summary. And you can find that online by going to our website, foodproducersforum, FORUM.com. And there's a splash page, a splash frame on the main page linked right to the text of the report. You can read it. It's in your hands right now.
That's Dan Rubin there, founding chair of the Food Producers Forum. Also here in the studio with me is Nick Fairbridge, a researcher and farming advocate. You know, I just kind of want to talk about foraging for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, foraging. It's, I enjoy doing it in my spare time during the summer sometimes. Sean Dawson, who just doesn't do it in his spare time. He's a professional forager, is on the line. What are you at?
Oh, this is it, Adam. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day, buddy. So what do you think
Happy
of
Earth Day, Dan.
Happy
What's
Earth
that?
Day, Sean, my friend.
when it comes to Earth Day, right? Coming on a show like this, talking about foraging, but like, where are your thoughts on Earth Day when you are yourself, Sean Dawson, doing what you do?
Earth Day is a great spotlight to appreciate exactly what we need in this earth is more earth, time with earth. So I think it's a wonderful day, but it's a very exciting day for me, not just because it's Earth Day, because I'm out harvesting the first sting nettles of the season this morning.
Yes,
So,
I
yeah,
saw a picture on your Instagram from a couple of days ago about nettles. So tell folks if they don't know about nettles and the first of the spring harvesting.
Yeah, so nettles is always a sign to me that spring is actually here. I know it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but yeah, to me that's the start of it all for sure. So yeah, the nettles came up pretty early this year. If you're in any coastal areas that are rich with nitrogen, it's a good time to get out and start picking the little nettle tips. And yeah, I use them for everything. I use them for tea, make a really nice tea, making a lot of pestos, put them in my stir fries, or pretty much anything I'm cooking this time of year. But
You
it's,
can also
just really,
dry them, right, Sean?
Yeah. Right now they're really small, so it's like just the really small, tender tips. It's the best time for cooking them, but later in the season when they get bigger and before they flower, it's a really good time to start harvesting them and drying them. Yeah.
Run us through a list of, it doesn't have to be exhaustive because I know you forage so much, but just run us through a brief list of the types of things you forage.
Man, everything from dandelions to mushrooms. This time of year is really the most exciting time of year for me because after a long winter, it's finally food coming up. But just so far this morning, I've been picking a lot of nettles. I picked enough dandelions to make a salad for supper, along with some sorrel, give it a nice little lemony kick. Yeah, the greens, the spring greens and shoots are coming up, and that's for me it is really such an exciting time. But yeah, just the past month I've been pretty busy with maple syrup, and I'm tapping the birch trees now, making birch syrup. So yeah, it goes from like 0 to 100 pretty quick.
What do you think, folks, for the understanding around foraging, what do you think if people haven't tried it before, what do you think they perhaps don't understand about it or perhaps should understand?
I think you should understand that there's just food right outside everybody's doorsteps. I mean, that's the most important thing. A lot of people think it's so daunting to get into it and learn all these plants, but if you just take it slow, and the spring is such a good time, start harvesting dandelions. Like, no one needs to be taught how to identify dandelions, but the spring greens are just like one thing that makes me feel like Popeye in the spring when I eat them. Like I really feel really charged after I eat dandelions. And same with the birch sap right now. I'm drinking the birch sap, and I swear to God, it's like drinking an energy drink in the morning. It gives you so much electrolytes and nutrients. But I just think that to get out there and start harvesting your own food, and you have such an appreciation for it all of a sudden. And yeah, food's expensive right now, and I think everybody knows that. And it's just such a really good time to get out there. Take it slow and take lots of pictures, fact check everything. Don't just rely on one source of identification. But yeah, just get out there and start getting some food.
Nick, you're going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, hopefully for people just like you, Sean, one of the things we're hoping to see out of this report, when we ask people, what kind of training do you need? What do you need to get out there and do more? Their top thing was, I need someone to help me learn how to identify mushrooms, identify plants. So there's an opportunity, right, for people in the know. If you're willing to have a bunch of people trail around and show them how to do it, I think there's great interest throughout communities.
Oh, yes. And we've been doing that for the last 6 years. Like, I've been doing that since the Grounds Cafe is open. We started our first tours in, I think, June 2nd this year. And we added, we were fully sold out last year, so we added 2 more tours a month. So we're doing 4 foraging walks a month from June right to November. So if anyone wants to get out that way, it is the best way to learn. You get out there firsthand and have someone show you. But, I mean, so many, if you just start with the invasive species, they're all so easy to identify, and so many of them are edible, like sting nettles and dandelions, Japanese knotweed, fireweed, all these early spring things that come up, and wild hop shoots, and even stuff in your backyard, like hosta shoots and sedums. Like, there's tons of stuff out there, and yeah, it really causes you to be so much more of a creative cook, and it's like I've never went to the grocery store and bought something that hey, I'm gonna go home and lacto ferment this now. But like, when you're out picking it, it's like, yeah, it causes you to step outside the boundary of what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and at a time sometimes when it can look like a scene from The Walking Dead for certain produce sections in the grocery store, to be able to go and have fresh stuff just right there on your plate same day that's grown around you, I mean, that's fantastic.
There's
I
I want to mention Sean's book, The Forager's Dinner, right?
Yep.
There's a book out through Boulder, the same company that recently published my garden book. And Laurie McCarthy has a gorgeous book about foraging and food traditions here in Newfoundland and Labrador. There's also a fellow, Stephen, I don't know if you've been talking to him, Sean, who has put together a foraging app for here.
Nope.
And he's working on getting that out to the public. But interestingly, he said, it's all very fine to have the book, because he started with inspiration from your book, he told me.
Cool.
But really, you need to get out there and learn firsthand. And that's where the walk and talk you do is so valuable.
Yeah, for sure. And it changes throughout the season. Like we include the same stuff, but we do a tasting after. And if you come early in the season, you're eating spring shoots, and a little later in the fall, you're getting a lot of sweet berry desserts. And in the mushroom season in the fall, we're cooking mushrooms. So yeah, it's a really cool way to get out there and see it. But yeah, the app sounds really awesome. Now, the one thing about apps, I find that a lot of people come up to the farmer's market and say, hey, my app said it's this plant.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it's not always the case, and especially with mushrooms. So it is a really awesome way for narrowing down what you're looking for and trying to identify.
Yeah, he and I talked about that, how it's the trickiness of positive identification, especially when you get into the mushrooms. And you know that I get really frustrated when I see people posting blurry photographs on Facebook and say, can you eat it? And 3 people say yes, 3 people say no. And most of us are going, oh my God, don't do that. Yeah, it's something you have to learn, but it's an adventure. It's a journey.
Totally. It's such a good journey. And like you said, you should never just rely on one source of identification. Like you check the internet, many sources, check guidebooks, you shouldn't be 90% sure what you're eating is what you think it is. It should be 100% every time.
So before we wrap this up, it's great because we've covered 3 different really zones: agriculture, commercial agriculture, composting, and foraging. Yeah, weird. How did that come about?
I don't know. Imagine.
Gee, I don't know. I want to make sure we have time to share with the listeners the recommendations.
Sure, let's go into that now. Sean, I'll let you go. Good luck foraging, buddy.
Right,
much appreciated.
Happy Earth Day. Yes, thank you so much.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy harvesting, everybody.
Sean Dawson, there, professional forager. All right, so recommendations. Where are we going? Like, what
there
are you?
13 recommendations that came especially out of what people told us that they needed or where the gaps were. So maybe we can tag team on this. We'll each take one and we'll just go up and back. So number 1, we need ongoing, comprehensive, province-wide evaluation and support for both commercial and community-based food production.
What else is there? What's number 1? Yes, let's go
That's
back.
number 1.
We'll quickly go through the list.
Absolutely.
Sure, let's do that.
Provincial policies and programs should be updated to validate and support home and community-based food production within municipal priorities, right? So getting those regulations and the barriers out of the way.
And still at the provincial level, provincial action is needed to eliminate, clarify, or simplify the municipal regulations and zoning requirements that are barriers to home and community food production. We need those cleared out of the way.
There we go. Next.
And a big one I fought for here, patchwork of arbitrary local food regulations should be replaced with more standardized provincial guidelines for local food production based on standards of agricultural best practice.
Right. Also, there's a tremendous need for public education about that food doesn't just have to be cheap. It has to be good for you. So there is a need for more effective marketing and brand development focused on food quality and health to create appreciation and support for local food.
And while there's already some out there to continue to support school-based and community education programs that are needed to make people of all ages aware of the direct link between food quality and human health.
And as we've already discussed, local abattoirs, cold storage options, composting centers, community pastures, and facilities for food processing need to be reborn right across the province.
Also support, which we've seen a few of our guests here thriving and doing already, but provincial networks to connect food producers and the processors.
And that's what FPF is, and we fill the response to that one. We also need a real sharing of resources, tools, and knowledge among people involved in food.
And a whole range of more direct distribution systems are needed. Things like farmers markets, but also online food hubs, community-supported agriculture, and other farm gate sales.
And finally, and we heard this from the farmers, and especially the small-scale producers, governments should eliminate taxes and penalties applied to non-commercial food distribution and provide tax exemptions, because according to CRA, if I swap garlic for potatoes with Nick here, we both owe a tax on it, HST. That's crazy. We need to clear the decks.
Well, income tax, but yes,
Yeah.
but a small exemption would absolutely. But that would also help the hubs grow up, because we might do it as individuals and be exempt, but when a hub comes together to try and support it, they run into those barriers.
All right.
Exactly.
And was that all 13?
Two more.
Two more. Hurry up. We don't have much time left. Go for it.
Oh, where are we at?
Yeah, provincial programs. Yeah.
To support local food production and make available public land, such as highway garden allotments, so a way to actually get people towards the land that they need.
And
finally, we need community-based trainings and mentorship in food production and processing skills. I know that is going on now in Labrador through College of the North Atlantic with support from Food First, but we need more on-the-ground training.
thanks for this Earth Day show, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so Nick Fairbridge there, Dan Rubin. So we answered that WTF question for Where's the Food here today on the Signal for Earth Day. And if you want to talk how to grow, guess what? Tomorrow on the show, it's the second and final preseason gardening show before the regular season kicks off in May. Michael Murray of Murray's Gardens in Portugal Cove will be by to help you get your grow season started. So get those questions ready, green thumbs. That's tomorrow. Taking us out, here's an Earth Day song for you from Neil.
Well, I dreamed I saw the knights in armor coming, saying something about a queen. There were peasants singing and drummers drumming, and the archers split the tree. There was a fanfare blowing to the sun that was floating on the breeze. Look at Mother Nature on the run in the 1970s. Look at Mother Nature on the run in the 1970s. I was lying in a burned out basement with the full moon in my eyes. I was hoping for a replacement when the sun burst through the sky. There was a band playing in my head, and I felt like getting high. I was thinking about what a friend had said. I was hoping it was a lie. Thinking about what a friend had said, I was hoping it was a lie. silver spaceship